Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's Spring into STEM lecture. Before I hand over to Adam to take things away, I just wanted to say if you have any questions throughout the webinar today, please do put them in the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll come to them at the end of Adam's presentation. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Adam.
Thank you so much. And welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Adam Szmul, and I'm a research fellow at the Department of Medical Physics and Biomedical Engineering, University College London. It is my pleasure to present you our work on the application of artificial intelligence to improve proton beam therapy delivery in children with cancer. There are around 375,000 new cancer cases in the UK every year, and radiotherapy is one of the available treatment options for cancer. It uses high energy radiation to kill cancer cells by damaging their DNA. Nearly 50% of patients diagnosed with cancer will undergo radiotherapy treatment during their cancer treatment. Radiation therapy can be delivered in a form of X-ray, which we will refer to as conventional radiotherapy, or proton beam therapy. Proton beam therapy has become available in the UK within the NHS, with the first centre in Manchester and the recently opened centre in London at University College London Hospital. Compared to the conventional X-ray radiotherapy, proton beam therapy is highly targeted, so reduces the risk of radiation damage. As you can see in the figure on your right, the colors indicate the amount of dose delivered to the tissue. We can see that the proton therapy, in the proton therapy, the doses are delivered only where the tumor is present. That makes it particularly favorable to children who are very radiosensitive and commonly develop treatment side effects later in their life. There is a number of challenges with proton beam therapy in pediatric abdominal cancers. In children, abdominal structures are affected by significant day-to-day fluctuations in bowel filling, which may lead to inaccurate dose deliveries. The treatment plan accuracy can be enhanced by daily imaging, allowing to monitor anatomical changes. And here we can see how the plan can be deviated if there is a lot of bowel filling changes in the radiotherapy plan. So prior to a radiotherapy treatment, a planning computed tomography scan is acquired. That is a high-resolution 3D image used for delineation of structures to be irradiated, as well as sensitive organs at risk to be spared. But as treatment is delivered over several days, patients do not stay static. Cone beam CT images can be acquired just before the treatment is delivered, when a patient is already on the treatment couch. Cone beam CTs show patients on the day of the treatment anatomy at the cost of lower quality of the images. Here we can see a comparison of the quality of the imaging modalities for the same cross-section of the same patient. You can see significant differences in their bowel gas positioning. So the aim of our work was to create synthetic CTs by improving the quality of cone beam CTs to comparable level of CTs. We wanted to preserve the anatomic correspondence between the synthetic CTs and the original cone beam CTs. And the method needs to be customized for the pediatric application where a wide range of patient anatomy deviations is observed and access to training datasets is limited. You might have heard about AI methods used for converting photos into paintings of your favorite artist, changing seasons in photos, or deepfake methods bringing paintings into life. They serve mostly entertaining purposes. In our work, we employ them for a more noble task to improve the quality of cone beam CTs. So we adopted the cycle-consistent generative adversarial network, which simultaneously generates synthetic images from two distinct modalities. In our case, it converts real cone beam CTs to synthetic CTs and real CTs into synthetic cone beam CTs. We tailored the original the original framework to address challenges in pediatric application. Here is a more detailed diagram showing the proposed framework. It consists of two networks working as generators for synthesizing CTs into cone beam CTs, and another one for synthesizing cone beam CTs from CTs. And two discriminators which aim to identify original CTs from synthetic CTs and original cone beam CTs from synthetic original CTs from synthetic cone beam CTs. There are also a few loss functions. We extended the original framework by introducing an additional structure consistency loss within the framework in a form of normalized cross-correlation between the original images and the synthesized version to enhance the anatomic correspondence. We also assume that cone beam CT represents a corrupted CT image with unwanted artifacts. Then, instead of generating a whole synthetic CT image, we estimated only global residuals, which were combined with the original cone beam CT to create the final synthetic CT image. We finally used smart training data selection via a weekly pair data approach. All images, CTs and cone beam CTs were mapped to an average image, and then a common section of the body present in cone beam CTs across all images was identified. The common section was mapped back to the original CTs and cone beam CTs, and only those slices were used for training. This allows us to use information from subjects from multiple cohorts that partially share relevant anatomical information. At the same time, we avoid poorly represented slices that could introduce artifacts to synthetic images. As our materials, we had 63 patients for which we had 1 planning CT and up to 10 cone beam CTs available. The images came from 3 anatomy regions: abdomen, thoracic, and pelvis. Our experiments included ablation study of the introduced modifications to identify the optimal configuration of the framework, and 5-fold cross-validation for the baseline vanilla cycle GANs and the proposed method. We tested 2 generator architectures, UNet and ResNet. For the evaluation purpose, we created virtual CTs by registering planning CT to cone beam CT and correcting for bowel gas differences. As the evaluation, we calculated 2 similarity measures, SSD and RMSE, with respect to both virtual CTs and original cone beam CTs. We present here the results for unit generator architecture only for the sake of clarity, but both architectures show the same pattern. In the ablation study, we evaluated vanilla cycle GAN without data selection and when only outliers were dropped out, which we note as a 1% overlap. We consider both these methods as a baseline. Subsequently, we tested global residual cycle GANs, adding the proposed modifications. The best results were observed for the proposed approach when all of the modifications were included. In 5-fold cross-validation in SSD evaluation, we observed superior performance of the proposed configuration in green over the baselines in blue and orange with respect to both virtual CT on the left and cone beam CT on your right. The same trend was observed for RMSE when also the proposed configuration in green outperformed the baselines. Here is an example of a cone beam CT and the corresponding virtual CT. Above are the results of the vanilla cycle GAN and the proposed approach. We showed different images to highlight how good our method is at artifact removal and structure preservation. The arrows point at the regions where the baseline structure correspondence with the reference images. The vanilla configuration is introducing additional air pockets which were not present in the original cone-beam CTs. So to conclude, our AI-based method improves the image quality of cone-beam CTs while preserving their anatomical structures. The proposed adaptation of the CycleGAN framework resulted in improved quality of the cone-beam CTs. The method has potential application in treatment plan verification and its immediate adaptation. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer questions if there are any.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. So if anyone has any questions for Adam, you can pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A. I just had a quick question, Adam. How easy is it to scale this type of technology sort of out into more hospitals than just I think there's 2 proton beam centers at the moment?
It's a really good question. We are working on that now as we are extending the project to because cone-beam CTs are required not only for proton beam therapy but also for conventional therapy. So we are now investigating using the same method for conventional therapy, and we do believe that it's perfectly suitable also for those patients, and we are exploring paths to apply this method for prostate cancer patients, head and neck patients, and adult abdomen. So yeah, we think that that's applicable, and we hope that it will be used for other regions and methods as well.
And where do you see, so in the next kind of three years, where do you see this technology sort of heading?
So we see a lot of interest also in the vendors of including such methods of enhancing cone-beam CT, which at this moment is not fully used. It's used mostly for the positioning of the patient, but there is more information which can be used for validating the plan, adapting the plan. So we see that there is a lot of interest in exploring that. So we do believe that in the coming years, similar approaches will be deployed or at least we hope that they will be deployed in clinical practice.
Fantastic, thank you. We've had a couple of questions come through on the Q&A box. So one of them says, you mentioned the framework was adapted for children. How was this done and what did it involve? So yeah,
that was particularly done at the data preparation step, as the pediatric population ranges from 2-year-old infants to 19, 18-year-olds, like almost fully grown adults. So the range of their body size was huge, and the networks were not really coping well with such big differences in the body size. So one of the key things that we had to use was to normalize the size of the body of the patients. Normally in machine learning, some level of variation is even wanted because it improves the performance of the method. But in our case, it was bringing a lot of unwanted deformations. So yeah, primarily we used body normalization.
Fantastic. And then we've got a couple more questions. Does this approach reduce the exposure to radiation in patients?
So it can reduce that, because if the planning could be adapted based on cone-beam CT, which is already acquired, then there will be no need to acquire additional CT for replanning. So I think from that perspective, yes, and potentially maybe the plans could also be performed in a way that the margins could be reduced. I hope that would be also possible.
And then we've got, do you plan to extend these techniques to imaging other parts of the body?
Yes, so we definitely do, and we are now looking into applying that method also for head and neck patients, prostate patients, and also other abdominal adult patients.
And then we've just got a question in the chat. How does the cost of proton beam therapy compare with the cost of standard radiotherapy regarding equipment?
So I don't think I'm the right person to answer the costing, but I think it's very important to have in mind the benefits that it brings, as currently proton beam therapy seems to be dedicated mostly for the pediatric patients who will live longer, and it's very difficult to judge how the cost of delivering compared to the costs of preserving their cancer-free life. So
and then we've just got one more question in the chat. If anyone has any other questions, please do put them in the chat or the Q&A. It says, have you checked the Sigittal or coronal slides for the sync CT? Is there any intensity continuity in these views due to the 2D axial slice training?
So yeah, that is a really good point. Some discontinuity we found originating from using data for training with contrast and without contrast. So we, for instance, could see some discontinuities in kidneys. So our next step, where we are extending that framework, is to move into 3D. That comes with some other limitations, for instance, memory requirements for the training of such methods, but we believe that it will eventually bring better results. But apart from that, we haven't seen that much discontinuities. But as I said, they were mostly originating from the contrast enhancement.
So I can't see any other questions in the chat or the Q&A. So that would be our prompt to bring today's session to a close. Thank you so much, Adam, for such a fascinating lecture, and thank you everybody for attending our Spring into STEM session today. That was fantastic. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you for your attendance. It was a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.